We're going. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Erica Shepard of Inner Fire Wellness, and I want to thank you for joining us today. I am doing a new thing called Fire Starters, and Fire Starters is interviewing wonderful people in this world about their story and relevant stories of their life, what's going on, to help people like us educate us and elevate us. And today on Firestarter, we have Dr. Alan Shepard of Novant Health. Hello, Dr. Shepard.
Hello, Erica.
Hello.
Good to be here.
Thank you. So I wanted to invite Alan today because he is a primary care doctor at the Novant Noda Clinic. Hello, Novant Noda Clinic. Say that 10 times fast. But he has been on the front line of this whole COVID-19 epidemic and pandemic. And as someone who's a former nurse and nurse practitioner, I used to be in those settings and clinics, and I know what it's like to be in the medical field. And even though my help now is no longer in that setting, there are a whole bunch of you out there who are putting themselves at risk to help others. And first of all, I want to say thank you for being there for people in that capacity, and that I'm, sending a lot of love and admiration out to you guys right now. So thank you for your service on that.
Gladly.
Awesome. And then the other thing is we just want to hear more about your story. So with that, I have a bunch of questions here for you today, but we'll just kind of let it unfold and see where it goes. And the first question I have is, what was your first reaction when you were hearing about this virus that was spreading like crazy? What was going through your head as a doctor who works in a clinic that could potentially see people with this virus?
Sure. So my context is that I work as a primary care doctor. So I'm people's family doctor, the doctor they come to for sick visits and prevention and treatment for their chronic conditions or injuries as they go along life. And I work in a neighborhood clinic, but I'm also part of a major health system. And so part of my responsibilities is to assess people who are sick and to answer questions about common concerns in the news. And so I think the first time I really started hearing about it was from patients when they were asking, hey, what should we think about this Asian coronavirus? And at the time, I remember thinking I probably should look into this. And so I looked into it a little bit. I hadn't gotten too much from my health system at that point. And I looked at a few resources online, and I thought, okay, well, it seems like, honestly, at that time, people were saying what we are recommended not to say ever now, which is the flu is killing more people than that. And that's not even in the US. So, hopefully people just stay calm and don't panic, And so I remember that was my initial reaction was, oh, okay, this is something that's happening in Asia. And, the H1N1 has happened in Asia before. That didn't really end up being too big of a concern in the US. And I think that's probably what I'll tell people is that for now, we're just going to, get our flu vaccines and hope stay healthy and try not to let it keep you up at night, but we'll let you know. I remember that was definitely about as much as it was at that time, in those early weeks.
Yes. So things have evolved since then. And what was your reaction as the news was starting to evolve and the narrative was starting to change?
Yeah, so it seemed like it changed really quick. Like within a matter of 2 or 3 days, it just escalated dramatically. I think just the first case they had in the US, that first day was when things started shifting. And so basically this has kind of upturned every aspect of my clinical day, because we have to get on emails and calls multiple times a day, and we have to read an email at the end of the night, get on a conference call first thing in the morning, read midday updates, do trainings on how to do things, and so how this has evolved as we realize that this is not a common cold. This is not an Asian problem. This is a pandemic. And even before we knew it was a pandemic that has the potential to really kill a lot of people, a lot of our neighbors, it was already becoming more important, as far as I think we have a role in this, like an active role, and we need to do something now. And what is that? And so I feel pretty happy with my health system's leadership in this, and being at the forefront of it, because it seems like we know everything before it's on the news or the CDC releases it to the people and things like that. But yeah, how it's changed is that this is probably the most important thing we think about every day, and then everything else is on top of that now. So it's gotten a sense of importance that's unprecedented, that I've never even thought about would exist in medicine.
That's heavy.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I've seen so far out there is one of my favorite educators, Mike McGarg, had put out a podcast episode on this, and he invited his audience to pause in moments like we just had and feel what's happening within our bodies. And so I like to do that now, and anyone watching can maybe take this opportunity to do the same thing, is just checking in and saying, okay, I have noticed that there's some tension now, and for me, it's in my shoulders. My breath is a little bit more shallow. My words aren't holding out as long. My back is tight down the middle. And that might be physical ways that I can tell that my body is feeling something different than when I wasn't talking about this, right? And that information can be super helpful, because the virus and the pandemic have its direct effect on our lives, as far as infection and respiratory issues and critical care and keeping people alive. But then it has this larger, almost indirect effect on how we're doing as a group, as a community, as a neighborhood, as a nation, as a world, and how we're feeling moment by moment within this environment. And that to me is just as important, if not more immediately important, moment by moment. And so knowing how I'm feeling and knowing how we're feeling through this can help us reduce the possibility of a second pandemic of sorts, of disease that's not caused by the virus, but by our response to its presence, and the stress that puts into our lives and our community.
So Dr. Shepard, are you saying that stress is an important thing to prevent disease?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Good. Tell me more, because
well,
I mean, I do for a living now, is helping reduce stress in people.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you're doing that. And I think that's a great focus to have in caring for people. There's the traditional model of stress that says that simply the elevated state that we're in causes measurable stress, not only in our emotions, but in our bodies, that can lead to development of chronic disease over time, like having high levels of stress hormone in our blood, like cortisol. And I think that most people are familiar with the word stress in that sense of, if I'm so stressed, I'm going to have a heart attack or something like that, some sort of caricature of it, which is very true. And also, there's the sense of stress in the fact that if we're feeling emotions and we're not navigating them well, and it's causing us to seize up or be tense or freeze or fight or run,
Right.
And we're doing that in a day-to-day state, when do we have time to take care of our needs? We have all these basic needs, the need for hydration, nutrition, to move our bodies in ways that we enjoy, to have connection with other people, to feel contribution, purpose. And if we're not sure how we're affected by stress, maybe that stress is shutting us down or distracting us from the things that we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And so that's something I've noticed pick up in both my own life, family life, but also with the patients I deal with is that heightened sense of emotion that can come up in normal spurts for individual lives, but has come up in a group sense where everyone is feeling that stress. And so everyone all at once is having to navigate the stresses and emotions.
Thank you for addressing that. The thing I wanted to follow up on is what you had just said about helping reduce the stress to prevent another pandemic. I would like you to explain that a little further so our audience understands what you mean by that, because me saying that, okay, Erica, now me working to reduce stress, why I left to reduce stress, I spent a lot of time educating people about why I chose to do that and the importance of that. And as a primary care physician, I would love to hear your expertise and explanation about why reducing stress now is going to help us prevent another pandemic in the future. That's how did I hear you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it. I like your words for that. And and I love what you do. I've only gotten samples of how you interact with patients, but everything that you showed me of your work is right in line with what I try to get across to people. And I thank you for taking some of my patients that I sent over.
Thank you.
And so really what I mean by that is the closest parallel that I've experienced personally in my life is after Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. There was a lot of devastation from the immediate storm.
Yes.
But then when I went there to help with the aftermath of that storm, to help clean up houses and things like that, I thought I was going to go clean up, destroy houses and help people with medical care and stuff. But what I found when I got there is the houses was a big deal. That was a very big deal. People got displaced and they couldn't be in their community anymore, and they weren't getting a lot of help cleaning up.
Right.
But then the second everyone talked about it, everyone that lived there, 6 months after it happened, when I showed up, they said there was the hurricane and then there was the second storm. And by the second storm, they didn't mean another hurricane. They meant the fallout of the social response to the storm. And everyone, including the people who lived there, the citizens, the neighbors, and the government and non-governmental organizations like the Red Cross and all, everyone had a different response to the disaster. And when they all were under that stress and they were trying to make decisions and get priorities and put their focus and money different places, they came into a lot of conflict and a lot of neglect for those who needed help. And so there was this huge second social fallout of a devastating event where people were displaced, they didn't have housing, they didn't have medical care, they were physically attacked when people tried to defend their neighborhoods with guns. And there was all kinds of societal fallout of how people were dealing with this stress that played out into the lives of the people who were there just as much as the hurricane. And so that was the first time I really experienced this, of like, wow, everyone I'm meeting seems to have been just as affected by the stress of this than the actual storm. And so,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was saying, so as little baby Alan going into New Orleans, I did know Alan during this time. And for those of you who are like, wow, they have the same last names, it's because we were married. And so spoiler alert, but we remained very good friends. But I remember you going there during that time and doing the medical care there. And now that you're a doctor, that's got to change your perspective looking back with hindsight about what you saw then. So now as you're describing the stress of Hurricane Katrina, the aftermath of it, relating it to this COVID situation, what were some of the physical, medical repercussions of people not coping and addressing their emotions and stress from the disaster that you saw, that you are concerned about happening again with COVID?
Yeah. I'll reframe it to our current situation to make it a little more relevant, but it's a good parallel. So basically, if we're thinking about the heightened response of our bodies of either fight, flight, or freeze as three very common ways of coping with intense stress, then the uncertainty that we're feeling about how long is this pandemic going to last? Are my loved ones going to be affected? Am I doing anything to put other people at risk? Am I doing something to put myself at risk? Should I be doing more? Should I be doing less?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the economic or financial security part of this of, am I secure? Can my needs still get met now or next week or next month? Here's the sensations back, right? I just used up my entire breath to talk about that. Now I'm a little out of breath. My neck is in a little bit of tension. Mm-hmm. And this is partly because I feel those things I'm talking about, and partly because I've witnessed those stories, those ideas, those stressing concerns within my family and friends and community. And I remember their stress. And so we can't really separate ourselves from it. Anyone that we care about, including ourselves, will bring up that shared stress. So specifically, I'm concerned about people's stress response if they're not able to take care of the real needs. There's the theoretical needs and there's the real needs. Theoretical needs would be, I might run out of toilet paper next month, right? For it to be a simple example. Whereas a real need might be, I haven't slept in 2 days. Right. And this is not far-fetched. Anyone who's prone to insomnia and anxiety has been, many people, I should say, have been having flare-ups where they're not sleeping. Yeah. And that's probably the most common concern I've heard so far when people are like, hey, Alan, or hey, Dr. Shepard, what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's happening a lot right now. And so that's what I mean. How can we make sure that the stress doesn't become a barrier for us getting our needs met? How can we process our feelings during the day so that by the time we need to go to bed, we can actually let go and relax and let ourselves rest so that the stress hormone can decrease, our body can rejuvenate, the circulation in our body can go from stasis to rest and rebalancing overnight, at least at night, if not also during the day when appropriate.
Right, which in turn helps our immune system.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So, lights out. I'm in a
Dr. Shepard, come back.
I'm in a motion sensor room office here, and I decided I've been too still during this conversation. I need to be more animated.
They're like, stasis, we need you to move. Move. No, I hear that. And as a doctor on the front lines of this, I think a lot of the viewers are interested in hearing how this is affecting you, your nurses that work with you, the staff, and the people you've come into contact with. How has this been impacting them? Because they don't have the choice to stay home.
Right. Yeah, let's broaden it. I'll talk from my experience, but let's also, of course, include everyone who's not in healthcare, but who is working.
Right.
And particularly is working outside their home and for all their needs of our society and community.
Which we appreciate you all.
At my clinic, it's a mix. I would say it's a mix of feeling like, I feel like my whole team feels grateful that they have income and almost like lucky, or it's like they have an unfair advantage over their community because, oh, I still have a job, I'm still getting paid, I'm still work. So I'll say that that's something I've noticed.
Yeah.
It's almost some shame or guilt creeps in even about like trying to downplay it, like, oh, well, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to work, and trying to almost fit in with the community, which I think is appropriate in some ways, as far as just trying to not seem like we're cocky or something like that. So there's that, and then beyond that, I think there's a deeper well of the similar feelings about being uncertain about our own job security, even because as people just get more sick, the hospitals will have a lot more need, but the outpatient clinics become more optional because, if this isn't an emergency, I can just not go in and see my doctor. And so there's a lot fewer visits right now, actually. So some clinics are closing. So even my team, you would think in healthcare, we don't have to worry about whether or not we're going to lose hours or lose our jobs, but yeah, it can happen in the non-hospital settings.
Like
and then
your settings,
like my clinic, because I think that we're going to be able to help continue to serve our patients, because we've shifted to a model of video visits and electronic visits, telephone visits, and insurance is covering those now. So I think we're going to still be able to see patients, and then whoever actually needs to be seen in person, we can continue to see. But the other side of this for everyone working here is the exposure risk, which is how do we balance giving the most appropriate care to our patients that they need and deserve from us, while also reducing our exposure and our patients' exposure to COVID-19, to that disease. And so we've had to change everything for this. We no longer have people wait in the waiting room. We have them come in one at a time when they're ready to be roomed, and we let them in through the private employee entrance so they can come straight into their room. And we open all the doors, and we wipe down all the surfaces between every patient. And if they need labs, we bring the labs to them in the room. And then when we're done with the visit, we have them wait while we get their papers, and we open all the doors and let them leave. We have masks the whole time. And so there's a sense of importance with every visit of like, this visit is important, and we're going to take care of you, and we're going to protect you and ourselves from the virus. And make it more personal, like when I go home and I need to feel like I did everything I can do to not expose those that I live with and care about. And they, not always, but I sometimes directly, and sometimes I wonder if they're a little scared every time I come home.
I was going to ask that.
And so I do my best to take care of myself while I'm here, but then I change clothes and wash the clothes and take a shower and
shaved your beard.
I shaved my quite glorious, formerly glorious beard. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, beard.
Because it's a small but probably significant chance that germs can survive on beards, and if I get coughed on or whatever during the day, and someone is asymptomatic but a carrier of it, I don't want that chance of it ending up on my beard and then bringing it home. So
right, you don't want that flavor saver.
Even with the mask, though, the beard was overwhelming.
It was extra. So yeah, in case anybody was seeing on my advertisement for this and being like, that's not Dr. Shepard, it is without the beard. Clarification. In case there was any doubt. But that has to be a little odd, because I know that we were talking, and I'm like, oh, if I were to have to meet up with you to do something, that maybe we should just do, not that we're going to do that for this, but that maybe I was thinking about you basically in the terms of, this is someone who's probably been around the virus. Because you're a doctor, not saying you have, but the chances are higher. And I know for myself, being vulnerably speaking, I was like, I shouldn't be even anywhere near you.
Yep. Yeah. And then take that. So that's a real thought and strategy that came to you, and that's totally reasonable.
Right.
And also in terms of the human experience, for me to either hear that directly, like right now, or to think, I wonder if they're thinking that,
right.
is still can be, it doesn't have to be, but can be a very isolating experience.
Absolutely.
To stir up loneliness or shame, or like a feeling of being outcast or
Right.
unclean,
Right.
in the
Which,
most biblical sense, but also a physical sense, I
yeah.
guess.
Right. And so has anybody expressed that to you, or have you, I mean, have you experienced that in any way, shape, or form that's made you feel a way of loneliness or isolated as a doctor?
The strongest I've ever felt it was when early in the course of this, in the first week where we started testing for COVID, all the standalone clinics like mine were the front line. So
Right.
we were at triage. We're still triaging people on the phone, but we were triaging on the phone. And if they qualify for a COVID test, then we were the ones to test them. And so, luckily, we had the option early on.
Nope.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm back.
Motion.
So luckily, we had the option early on to decide whether or not we'd test outside the clinic in the parking lot. And I immediately took that option. So every single person that we had suspicion for COVID, we had them stay in their personal vehicle on the parking garage adjacent to our clinic. And then we would go over there and put on the full gown and mask and goggles and everything, gloves. And we would do the interview, listen to their lungs, or whatever needed to be done medically in their car, and then do the swab tests and check them for flu and strep. But if those were both negative, meaning they didn't have a different explanation for their illness, then we had to do the COVID swab.
Got it.
And coming back in toward the clinic with the gown on, in what is pretty much public because it's a parking lot, that's when it hit me of like, oh, people are scared of me right now, or at least that's how I felt, and they probably were. Like the looks were just like, what is going on over there? Like, I need to get as far away from this situation as I can.
Right.
And so I had not had that look so directly at me, and feeling that compounded. And then I did a proper degowning and all that, and went back in the clinic clean and washed my hands and everything. But as I'm coming back in the clinic, I feel like the dirtiest person in the world, even though I did everything right and everything's exactly what's recommended. That's when I felt uncertain, unsure how to act, a bit of shame in the sense of like, almost like it felt similar to how if I did something wrong or foolish, like looking for a solution, how can I recover from this situation? And me having felt that in such a appropriate situation where I'm helping and doing the best I can for the public, I wonder how many people working at grocery stores and gas stations and so forth, people who have a lot of human interaction, even with the gloves and all that, I wonder how many of them come home and feel dirty and at risk, and what kind of toll that could take on their mental state and their ability to rest and feel loved and accept love and give love and things like that.
Right. And I really, if any of you are watching who are in the current work sector, heard Dr. Shepard just explain that, I would love to hear if you resonate with that at all and feel like, hey, me too, I've felt dirty and ashamed and maybe not safe. And also people who are single during this time. I don't even know how y'all are doing it, because I've only recently gotten into a relationship, and I've been, social distancing and quarantining myself, but I have a person to snuggle up to at night. And I can't imagine how I'd feel if I didn't have that person in my life right now, you know? So I hear that, but like you said, even being in the position you are, the exposure and the attitudes around that, I hear how you're feeling on that. That's very valid.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave that example, because another important point that is a soft recommendation, but I think individual by individual need to consider, is that human connection, touch, to be heard, to be seen, to be known, to contribute, to have mutuality. These are universal human needs that everyone needs to express.
Yeah.
And you can go 2 days, 5 days, maybe a week, maybe 3 weeks. I don't know. It's a spectrum, but you can go some time without these needs getting met. But if you go for too long, it will take a toll on your health, because these are expected needs in your mind, body, your physiology. All of it depends on your needs balancing. And so one recommendation I heard is that it's for people, especially who are very regimented, disciplined people, to realize that shelter in place and social distancing recommendations are assuming that you have some human contact, because most people have a roommate or a family member or a relationship or children, someone that they house with.
Right.
But for those who live alone or live with pets only, or they don't know their roommate well, or don't have a good relationship with whoever they house with, a soft recommendation that I've heard is that you can reasonably consider yourself in one other household. So say you have really trusted, close relationships that live a mile away from you, and you want to eat dinner with them each night and keep your appropriate distance, or decide that you're a family together and do all the right hygiene, and it's equivalent to you are in one household but you live in two different households. I think that's very reasonable. Not that everyone should do that as a rule, but that if you are not able to get your needs met and you feel like your health could be at risk for having isolation, I think it's reasonable for them to join another household, either physically or by bridging it by commuting to their place back and forth, and still have a closed loop around you and that other household, where you're not bringing in outside disease and things like that, but joining together into a slightly larger household, if only in spirit.
I really appreciate you saying that, because there are more people out there who don't have trusted at home, good, intimate relationships, more so than I think we think, and to give that responsible and intentional recommendation is huge. And so I really appreciate you giving that recommendation, because that will help a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. And, of course we want to be responsible about that, right? So if you're going to join another household, you got to be thinking, well, how can I do that responsibly and safely? And so let's just spend a second to go over the most trusted recommendations for hygiene and personal safety.
Yes, I wanted to hear Dr. Allen's recommendations.
So one would be the COVID-19 disease and the coronavirus that it's represented. It is destroyed by soap and water, and even cool water. So if you use soap and water on your hands for 20 seconds, hitting all the appropriate places, spending time on your thumb, each finger, fingertips, palms, and wrists, back of the hands.
Back of the hands.
Palms. Yeah, 20 seconds, much longer than we just did now. Then you will have eliminated COVID from your hands. And the hands are the biggest place that it gets passed to other people and to your own membranes. The way that it gets inside your body is if it touches your mucous membranes in your eyes, your mouth, and to a lesser degree in your nose.
Wet place.
And so, tongue, wet place. Oh, wet place, yeah. And then, so all those things all those places can be a portal of entry for the virus, and usually you touch it with your hand.
Right.
And that's even more common than someone coughing on you, right? What are the chances someone's going to cough on you compared to you'll touch something that they already coughed on?
Like a scratch in your eye, you got.
Or even more common, someone coughs on themselves, like their own hand, and then they touch a surface, and then you touch that same surface.
Yeah. So maybe
that's much more common than someone coughing directly on you,
right.
and or coughing or on your hand,
Yeah.
So yeah, wearing gloves while you're out is reasonable if you have them. Wearing a mask, that recommendation's evolving. I'll point you towards the CDC for that. I can't remember if that's changed recently.
CDC.gov, they do get a lot of up-to-date recommendations on that.
Yeah, and then the definitely every state is different right now as far as social distancing, but we probably should talk about social distancing.
Yes.
Right now in North Carolina.
Practicing.
What's that?
We are currently practicing.
We are. This is an example of social distancing. So everybody knows what's social distancing right now. But maybe one thing worth saying is that depending on where you live, you might have different recommendations of how much is needed, or at least mandated. So in North Carolina, everyone is mandated for a 30-day period to shelter in place, meaning that you stay in your home unless you're going to very designated things, which include mostly medical care, food, and like basic, like humane necessities of life.
Right.
So that's what we're doing in North Carolina. And I would say in general, that's what I would recommend for everyone in the United States, probably to a lesser degree the world, or at least developed countries that have high populations in cities and all that, which is most of the world.
Yeah.
And so the reason for that, yeah, we never really stated the reason, because some people really aren't sure how important is this compared to my own needs. Like if I need to go have fun, or if I need to go have connection, or if I need to go on a trip, or work, like, should I really care about this? Like, so even in places that has lower numbers, like I'm from Arizona, and Arizona, at least last time I checked, had lower numbers, so they weren't having quite as strict mandates yet.
Yeah.
And that's probably changed by the time I heard about it last. But everywhere really needs to be doing the shelter in place for now, because there's rapid spread. And the flatten the curve recommendation that many people have probably heard on the news means that if everyone gets sick all at once, we're going to overwhelm the healthcare system. And people like me will be called into the hospitals to work as hospitalists and not be able to take care of our outpatient clinics. The hospitalists themselves will be asked to work over and over and over and get burnt out and probably get sick themselves, if not with COVID, with something, mental sickness even. And then people are going to be asked to come out of retirement. And even if all of us are doing our jobs and shifts, nurses and everyone, then we're just limited by how many rooms we can put those people in and how much equipment we have. Because the most vulnerable people who get this, which is typically the older you get, the more at risk you are for serious complications or death from this virus. And also the more chronic disease you've experienced, the higher risk you are. And so, for example, someone who's in their 50s with bad lung disease would be at high risk, or someone in their 70s with heart disease would be at high risk, things like that. And these are people that we know and care about. These are our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, our cousins, our bosses, our pastors, our favorite restaurant owner, or who knows, people from your neighborhood, your community. When we're talking about pandemic, and again, this is a good time to check in with your body.
Yeah.
When we're talking about pandemic, and I'll say this first because Mike McGarg did such a good job with this on his podcast. But if anything feels so overwhelming in your body that it's affecting you, feel free to pause this and process that information. Process it meaning feel it, let yourself experience the emotion, go outside, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. You don't have to hurt yourself just to get information.
Right.
And that goes with listening to this right now, and it goes with listening to the news or anything that causes a feeling of disorientation or things being out of control.
Well, thank you for sharing those insights. It's great to hear a perspective coming from someone in the medical field right now who's experiencing everything firsthand. So to wrap up for today's fire starter, I could talk probably for another 2 hours about this, but we want to keep things streamlined. Is what are your top 3 recommendations for everything going on right now? What are Dr.
Sure.
recommendations?
Sure, yeah. The first one would be to reduce your exposure to the virus, both for your own health and for mostly the health of anyone who's at the margins of who's at the most vulnerable in our society. Like the folks we were talking about before, which people we care about if we really tune into the fact of, oh, I do know these people.
Right.
And so that would be to follow all the social distancing recommendations, including sheltering in place when possible. And then the second thing would be to stay physically healthy. And by staying physically healthy, I would say to get your physical needs met daily. Mm-hmm. This is getting enough sleep when possible, of course. Yeah. If you can't sleep all at once, taking naps, resting.
Took one right before this.
This is perfect. Yeah. Resting while you're asleep, resting while you're awake by coming down off these emotions, turning off the news, putting away overstimulated storytelling like really intense TV shows or movies that are keeping you amped up. Yeah. Doing low stimulation activities to rest, like having dim lighting, reading a book rather than watching screens, things like that can help you come down off of this. Drinking enough water, moving your body every day. So getting outside, taking walks while also using social distancing, 6 to 10 feet away from other people. Getting some natural sun every day. And then getting good nutrition, eating fruits that contain vitamin C, like citrus, eating whole foods and vegetables rather than boxed or highly processed foods when possible.
I agree.
So all those physical things that we can do for our health maintenance are really important right now to protect ourselves and our community. And then the third one would be letting yourself, checking in with your body physically, like tension, like we were talking about before, your breath, and then staying curious about your emotional state. Yeah. It's like, oh, I hear that the temptation is to think, oh, I just have a problem right now. Like I'm not able to sleep, or I can't concentrate, and that's just a problem I'm having. Well, okay, that's part of it. But is there an emotion behind that you're not fully aware of? Like, are you feeling scared? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you going through a stage of grief about this massive change? And is it possible to more fully experience this feeling that's in me right now? And so my recommendation is stay curious about that. And if you find that there are feelings there, letting them come forward and expressing them as they come, either in the moment or when you have time at the end of the day to talk with a trusted friend or family member and help process that emotion with another person by sharing it openly with them.
That's fantastic. And tying that back to what you said much earlier about Hurricane Katrina, are these top 3 recommendations? Oh, motion. Bring it back.
Light.
Maybe you got to twerk to put it back on.
I really do. The light makes me work for it.
So, I don't know if you heard me. I said maybe you need to twerk to turn it back.
Yep, that would work.
Speaking of physical activity, twerking is not right.
That's a good way to move your body.
Maybe you can.
Alan recommend.
Maybe you can make a video of that later for everybody to grab an exercise option.
Top 3 recommendations.
Love it. Sorry, what I was saying before I got distracted by that whole scenario was your top 3 recommendations. do you see these as obviously helping in the right now, but tying it back to what you said earlier about Hurricane Katrina and that second hurricane coming, do you see these as essential to prevent a second aftermath of this, like the emotional stress, physical fallback?
Absolutely.
Of that?
Absolutely. I would say, numbers that I heard that were from good, reliable, real numbers was that the virus has the potential right now, unchecked, to take 200,000 to 1 point, I feel like 5 or something million lives within the U.S.
Yeah.
And we need to do everything we can to prevent those numbers,
Right.
by following all these recommendations. Beyond that, I feel like the second fallout has the potential to affect, I'm going to make up numbers now, but for the answering your question, like a broader amount of people than that. This could affect the fallout from this. If we don't help each other, if we don't take care of ourselves and each other, the fallout could be most of us, right? And there's 300 something million of us here. And so even though those numbers about who would die from the virus are devastating, I think that equally devastating is the potential of hundreds of millions of us having serious health consequences in our lives, in our relationships, in our well-being by failing to take care of ourselves and each other. And so the time to start getting good at this is now, because this is going to be a generationally defining event in our culture and our time. And the more we can do to take care of ourselves and to become healthy, the more empowered we'll be able to take care of our communities.
Love it. Dr. Alan Shepard, I thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to all of us about this and your experience and sharing candidly and vulnerably. It's just really, really appreciated. So thank you. And thank you for all the ways you're helping right now. You're not alone. And I wholeheartedly recommend that we really put that as a priority to help each other out right now. We really always should be. And I think this is one of those backwards ways of remembering that. However, it's like, we really got to do this now. And just like you said, I don't think a lot of people are thinking about the possible second pandemic from this that has nothing to do with the virus.
Yeah,
And
well,
so
I really appreciate you hosting this conversation and having me here. And I think that this has been a great, helpful conversation for me as well. So thank you for having me on.
It's my pleasure. For people who are curious about you, because you are a primary care physician and a wonderful one I can attest to. He's a holistic primary care doctor. Tell them if people want to learn more about you, where can they find out information?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, you can type me into Google. It's Alan Shepard, ALLENSHEPARD, and then type in Novant Health, NOVANT, Novant Health, and our website will pop right up there. We're located in Noda, neighborhood of Charlotte, and taking primary care patients, and I also do traditional osteopathic treatments for anyone who's familiar with that. So you can book online or call, so anytime if we can be helpful.
Absolutely. And for those of you who aren't familiar with osteopathic work, Google it. It's very much, it's hands-on body work that helps you elevate your physical health. That's what it's there for. It's a very holistic approach, which I love. So for those of you who are looking for more physical support, go see Dr. Alan Shepard. And he also gives great emotional support as well. And for those of you who are curious about processing those emotions and things like that, you are always welcome to contact me and Interfire Wellness as well. Thank you again, Dr. Alan Shepard. I thank you so much once again. And I will see you guys next time. If you have any questions from this recording that you want to ask me, you can feel free to comment below or direct message me. And if there's anything directly for Dr. Shepard, I would be happy to pass it along if you want to message it to me, or you can find him on Facebook as well. But feel free to comment on the thread because he's tagged in it too. And that way he can directly answer you. All right. Thank you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. And we will see each other soon next time. Have a good one.